Hi, I'm Tony. Welcome to So Lounge. Imagine knowing how to cut knit fabric without stress or stretching. Good news, I'm going to show you how to lay out pattern pieces and cut them out using knit fabric. Be sure to click that like button underneath this video. Knit fabric is easy to use when you know how to work with it. So today we're going to go step by step through laying out your pattern and cutting all your pieces out to prep for sewing. So Lounge is the ideal place for beginners to learn to sew one pattern at a time. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a stitch. Knit fabric is knitted, obviously. So just the same way you would knit a scarf is the same kind of pattern of loops that you would use to knit fabric. Now, knit fabric is manufactured in different ways. Sometimes there is a selvage, and this is one of the fabrics I'm going to be using to make this dress. And you can see it has a selvage on it, and it is on both sides of the fabric. You can actually see a distinctive selvage. But not all knit fabric has a selvage. So this turquoise fabric that I have lying down here, it only has a selvage on one edge of the fabric, which means that we can't match that up to the other selvage to try and get this all on grain. And it's not exactly grain because it's knitted, but we want to get our knit lined up so that once we cut out our pattern pieces, everything's going to hang straight and it'll all stretch the same way. So if we cut it out kind of wonky, then it'll stretch a little bit differently than if we cut it out straight, and then everything will stretch evenly across all the pattern pieces. So to do this, we're going to look very, very closely at the ribs on the knit fabric. And you may be thinking like, what are you talking about? So think of a tube sock or sweater, and you know how they have certain kinds that have like a heavy stripe kind of in it that is like a ridge that's raised compared to the rest of the fabric? That's a rib. Now, if you look very, very closely at your knit fabric, and this is like a medium weight, just cotton knit, you will see that there are very, very faint lines going vertically across the fabric. So that's the line we want to line up. We want to fold it on one of those ribs going all the way down the side. And I've already done that and pinned it. So I have my fabric ready to go. But we're going to go in for a closer look so I can show you what I'm talking about. The little magnifier. So what we're talking about, I'm going to try and do this, okay, is these little lines that you can see here. And we want to get one of them lined up along the entire edge of the fabric. And I'm going to take that pin out so you can see it a little bit better. So you can see how there are individual little ribs there and how they're going to all line up. So you want the same one going down the entire side of the edge of the fabric. Let me get that back on focus. There we go. So that's what you want to do. That's what we're doing. We're folding the edge of our fabric so that one of those ribs is the same rib that goes all the way down. So hopefully you didn't get too dizzy looking at that, but I really wanted to show you the magnified view so that you would know what I'm talking about, because it's hard to see. And it's hard to see with a naked eye. So if you are using knit fabric, it's a good idea to just grab any kind of a magnifying glass so that you can see that a little bit better, or maybe your eyesight's a little bit better than mine. But regardless, it's worth getting your fabric all lined up on that same rib so that now when we start cutting out these pattern pieces, it all makes sense and everything is going to line up. Now, I previously made dress B, which is the shorter version of this dress, and now I'm going to be making dress D. And it has cuffs on it, and then it also has the same neckband that all the other versions do. But because this is the fabric I'm using, I thought I'd mix it up a little bit and make the cuffs out of a solid color turquoise that matches. And the neckline is the neckband as well. So that's what I'm working on with this fabric. And when I have a piece that's a pretty long piece and the grain line is drawn very short on it, what I like to do is just extend out that grain line so that I can match it up and it's gonna all the pieces are gonna line up. So the top will match and the bottom, because if you just line up that little top piece, the bottom may be slightly off, and then you're gonna have problems down the road because your fabric is gonna be a little bit wonky. So I just draw a line down the entire length of that arrow, and now I know that wherever I measure to, it's gonna work. So let's take this out of the way and let me grab my tape measure. So we're laying out this pattern piece to match this edge that we have pinned and that we have folded on that single rib of the knit fabric. So that's crucial to being able to cut your knit fabric the right way, is to lay it out so that all your pattern pieces are going to work together. Now this piece is not cut on the fold, so I do not have to line it up perfectly to this edge, but what I do want to do is measure from, sorry, I'm hitting the mic, measure from the top of the grain line over to the edge. And I usually like to just line it up with an even number instead of like a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 of an inch or something, because it's just easier to follow along. So, okay, that's 1 inch. That's 9 inches from the line over to the folded edge. So I'm just gonna put a pin in there to just hold it. Now, when you're pinning knit fabric, you don't want to stretch and pull the fabric. You just want to gently put in a pin, make sure everything still lies flat and smooth. And then we're going to go down to the other end of the grain line and we're going to measure 9. And see, now I have to move my pattern piece over a little bit so everything matches up. And there we go. I'm going to put in another piece down here. And then I'm probably going to put in a couple of pins on either side of the pattern, because that will hold everything and keep it from moving. Because this is knit fabric, it is going to stretch a little bit and we want to minimize that. So the way to do that is to add more pins. So I'm going to just poke this in here. All right, so I have my tape measure and I am measuring 9, and you can see that it's not quite at the 9 mark. So I'm going to scoot my pattern over a little bit. You should be able to slide your pattern because you don't want your pin in there super, super tight. Okay, that's not a little bit past 9. And you want to keep your tape measure perpendicular. And that's 9 for that one. And then up here, this is moved over a tiny bit, so let's scoot that over just a little bit. I'm going to unpin this and move this down. So there we are at 9. And this pattern piece is ready to go. But when I cut knits, I prefer to use some dressmaker shears. These are just some really nice sharp scissors, because you have more control over what's happening with them. The rotary cutter, there's a little bit of a wobble, you could mess up, things can move a little bit easier, and I just have more control with the shears. So that's what I'm going to be using. I am going to start on this far left side, and I'm just going to start from the bottom and cut my way up the side. So what I'm going to do as I'm cutting is I'm going to be holding and pressing down the very edge of the fabric, of the pattern, and not pulling the fabric, because we don't want this to stretch out. And since this is the second time I'm making a version of this dress, I know that if you aren't careful, you are going to stretch things out. And this is a good way to just avoid doing that, is to just take your time and cut carefully to make sure that everything lines up and nothing moves, because that's the whole goal of this. So I'm just going to smooth my pattern out the other way. I'm going to go across the top next towards that other side, and just make sure you get your scissors in there and then cut across the top. And once again, I'm still just holding this top edge. I'm cutting slowly so that I don't pull my fabric as I'm cutting. And that's basically the way you want to cut knit fabric. Don't rush, take your time. You'll be happier in the end when you actually get around to sewing this. All right, so just a close-up view of cutting. As you can see, I'm holding the fabric, the pattern with my hand. The fabric is kind of loose underneath. I'm not rushing, and I'm just very slowly cutting along this edge, keeping the pattern lined up. And just going along. Now that we have the turquoise knit fabric cut out, we are going to move on to cutting our knit fabric for the main body of the dress. And earlier I mentioned that this fabric does have selvages on either side of it. And the way you know that is because if you fold back the selvage, you can see the needle marks on both sides of it. That's where the fabric was held as it was being knitted. So we know that it's a flat knit and it's not a knit that's been knitted in the round. So sometimes machines will sew giant tubes of knit and then they cut it on one side. That could be the case for the turquoise fabric, which only has a selvage on one side. But with this fabric, it was knitted flat. Now, in theory, that means that when you match up the fabric, the rib should line up along the length, but it does not. And the way we know that is because when we match the selvages and smooth out the fabric, it's doing this funky kind of ripple along the fold line. And that means that it's not lining upright. And even though I've been messing with this and matching and smoothing for a good 20 minutes now before starting this video, I can't make it do what I want it to do. And this is after it's been washed and dried and it's been ironed, so it should not be trying to go back the way it was. To fix this problem, we're going to have to do the same step that we did with the turquoise fabric, which is getting the rib lined up along the edge of the fabric. All right, so this is the folded edge of the fabric. You can see that is where we have our selvages matched over on that far side. You can see that this top line is not lining up when we have our selvages matched. That's probably because it was cut a little wonky. And then you can see how along this fold, even though our fabric is pretty smooth and it's matched up at the selvages over there, we have this weird kind of fold, and you can't really get rid of that. Like, I've literally been working on this for about 20 minutes. And I just can't get that out. So the only way to get this on the correct rib is going to be to repeat the process from yesterday, go in closely and pick a rib and then go down the entire length of the fabric to get it all lined up. So in order to get this piece of fabric on grain and with that single rib lined up along the fold line, we need to open this up. This fabric is 100% cotton. Cotton really likes to stick to itself, and for some reason this fabric is just really sticking to itself and enjoying itself being all connected. So because this is a longer piece of yardage, this is 2 yards and the turquoise piece of fabric was only a half a yard, this is a little bit more unruly. So I'm going to pull this back so we can kind of manipulate this edge. All right, so now that I have this edge and it's folded along the rib, you can see how it's lying nice and smooth, and there aren't any of those weird like folds and puckers along it. But when you look at the other side of the fabric, you can see that first of all, this was not cut straight. And another reason you can tell it isn't cut straight is because if you follow these orangey and red dots, you can see like where the print is on the pattern, so you can see how much off this edge is here when you go across the fabric. And then there are parts of the selvage over there that are overlapping from the original selvage, as you can see here. So this is what happens when they are not lined up, but we have a nice rib all along this whole side, and that is what we are going to use to measure the grain lines on our pattern. And because it is nice and smooth and all lined up, so we're going to be following the pattern instructions. This piece gets lined up along the fold line, so that is super easy. And we're going to put in some pins, and then we're going to start cutting. All of my pattern pieces are pinned down, and now we are ready to cut out. So the first thing I'm going to do is scoot the fabric off the table just a little bit so I'm not quite on that very edge over there. There we go. and still want to keep all this lined up. So we'll smooth this out when we get back to it. But we are going to start with this top piece up here. And just like before, we're going to be doing the same process to cut our knit fabric. And that is going to be to hold the edge of the pattern in place. Don't move or stretch your fabric. And we are going to be cutting along these straight lines going towards the selvage edge of the fabric and keeping this ribbed edge, which is where we have the fabric folded, as smooth as possible as we are cutting. The very last step in cutting your knit fabric is to go back over your pattern pieces and make sure you cut out all the notches. It's much easier to do this once you've cut everything out than trying to cut notches while you're still trying to cut out your pattern pieces. It ensures that everything will stay matched up to the ribs of the fabric, and it'll be much easier to sew after the fact. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to click like and subscribe to my channel so you never miss a stitch. And if you want more from Sew Lounge, head on over to sewlounge.com to get your free download, 7 must-have sewing tools. It's all the tools a beginner needs to get started sewing fast. Until we meet again, happy sewing!